This is Rita Matuzic, and you are listening to the Real Talk, Real Results podcast, the show that does not sugarcoat B2B marketers' everyday challenges and discusses actionable real issues. Today, we are talking about commercial and public sector marketing in the identity verification space. Joining me are Brian Chidester and Heather Adams, marketing leaders at Socure. Brian and Heather, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background and expertise?
Yeah, Rita, we'd be glad to. Thanks so much for having me today. I lead demand gen, ABM, marketing operations, and our SDR team here at Socure. I've been at the company for coming up on 3 years and just super excited about how innovative we've been in the market, the trajectory of our product evolution, and excited to talk more about that today.
Yeah, Rita, and thanks again for having us. As you mentioned, I'm Brian Chidester. I've been in the public sector marketing space for just over 20 years now and lead public sector marketing at Socure. So really focused on how we can educate the market, especially within government, around best practice in digital identity. We leverage so much excellent work that Heather's team does and try to kind of leverage that into the public sector and really support them on best practices and really what best in class looks like.
Thank you both for sharing a bit about yourselves. I'm super excited to dig into this conversation. Brian, let's start with you. In the public sector and B2G business to government perspective, where do you see the overlap in B2G and B2B marketing?
It's all really one. I think there's a couple things that are nuanced about it, but what's really interesting about it is, and Heather will tell you because we'll go into conversations around industries and different verticals she supports, but in the public sector, people see themselves as verticals. So we will very often call it the industry of industries. If you're working Department of Energy or you're working Department of Transportation, they think of themselves not just as public sector professionals, but as transportation professionals or energy professionals in that field. Same with like SEC within the financial services field in that regulated space. So I see very significant overlap. And especially when you get into the specifics of, say, digital identity, or you can pick and choose whatever technology you're really working in, the use cases are very complementary. So, I mean, I started this conversation off by saying we leverage a lot of the great work that Heather's team does. It's because a lot of it is very analogous. So we can take it, and there's a couple tweaks that we can make around it, right? Or things that we need to make sure are highlighted, like compliance measures like a FedRAMP or state ramp or whatever kind of area you're focused on. But it boils down to the types of personas and the use cases that you're targeting. And to me, that's the biggest overlap.
Brian gave you a really great intro, but what do you think are some of the differences that we can learn from each other from B2B and B2G? And what can B2G marketers learn more from the B2B marketers?
I would say, when you look at the two different spaces, there's definitely differences in the buying process and the procurement process between the two groups. But at the end of the day, I think you find that there's a lot of similarities whether you're looking at commercial or government. At the end of the day, these folks have big challenges that they're facing in our space, really figuring out trusted identity. There's a lot of similarities in those challenges that they're trying to solve. And so I think there's a lot more similarities in the programs and the messaging that you're putting together, both sides being very focused in what are the challenges we're trying to solve, what are the goals that we have, and how can we partner with vendors to help move us down that path. So I think there's a lot more similarities than you sometimes think between the two groups.
I think naturally transitions into my next question is to talking about verticals and industry marketing. Brian, in the public sector space, is mainly focused on that one vertical, while Heather, you can focus on multiple verticals and industries. How do you both think about vertical marketing, strategy, planning, and execution?
Vertical marketing is very much core to the ABM strategy that we're putting into place. Socure is a very technical product, and so it's a very complex and sometimes lengthy sales cycle. So the more that we can learn the specifics, the use cases, the challenges that each of the verticals that we're targeting, and speak their language, the more that we can do that through our content, through our messaging, through our channels, the more success that we've seen through our programs. So really breaking those down with government, as Brian said, being verticals within verticals, we also look at our specific verticals how they're tackling the challenges that are specific to them within their market and their vertical, and how can we really align the solution that we're bringing and how we message that to speak their language. And so we do that through creating content experiences, creating our live and in-person experiences to be very much catered to aligning to solving those specific challenges, and then bringing in the voice of those that have their peers, right, that have had success in tackling those challenges so that we can really foster that interaction across that peer group, which I think is so much more meaningful than just, you know, pitching a feature benefits type of a approach.
Feel like I just need to copy and paste everything Heather just said because it's absolutely spot on. I think the most specific thing is what she said around having its own distinct language within an industry, and it's so true. I've sat on multiple industry teams where it's myself leading a public sector team, but then also having peers that focus on financial services or life sciences or energy or whatever that vertical looks like. And it's this specific language that is the difference. It's the use cases are very much the same, but it's being that translator for what the value is and then identifying the personas. And I'll give you a great example. Within a commercial entity, you might be focused on only one persona or one persona across an organization or multiple organizations, right? You may be targeting a CIO, or you might be targeting somebody that is have a digital identity um, title. Within government, it all depends. Let's take a state government, for example. It depends on if that federal or that CIO has federated their IT services or not. Are they centralized, decentralized? That makes a big difference on how you target the personas and how you message the value. And then when you dive down into kind of what the sub personas look like, you're looking at program manager type titles that would be leading these projects versus a senior leader. So when I look at a program manager, I'm talking about somebody who is running an unemployment insurance program. Now, if it's a decentralized state, what they're looking at is, okay, how do I bring digital identity in my program? If it is something that is centralized, there's going to be a holistic digital identity program that unemployment insurance program ties into. So you can see the difference right away, right? It's how you message it from a broad platform based to a more programmatic use case. And it's really identifying that intelligence to understand how you message to those personas. But it really, honestly, it sounds complex, but it really boils down to exactly what Heather said. It's the message, it's the language that you use around these individuals that is specific and niche to that industry.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you both talked about messaging. It's so key. I want to dig into what are some of the challenges that arise when you're creating so many personalized messages or campaigns or content, and how can our listeners overcome those challenges?
Our market's very dynamic, right? There's things that change all the time and kind of different trends that you're aligned to. Look at artificial intelligence, right? I mean, it is over the past 12 months has absolutely changed the landscape of the world that we're living in right now. And within public sector specifically, there's legislation in a majority of states understanding how AI is going to be leveraged, specifically generative AI, how it's going to be leveraged, what the decisioning looks like, and how we message that becomes very intricate, right? Because we don't want to put a message out there that goes against what policy might align to. So we have to be very, very clear on how we're putting whatever our value proposition is out, because we might believe and say, hey, you know what, artificial intelligence is the next piece of digital identity and this is what you should be leveraging. But then you have lawmakers that are saying, yeah, but we're not quite sure yet, and we need to make sure that we have all our t's crossed, i's dotted before we're going to align to that. So if we get ahead of it, sometimes we can position ourselves really negatively. So I mean, that's just one example of a myriad of different things that we need to align to in this kind of dynamic environment.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, like those external factors that Brian talked about are so important, right? Things happening in the market, regulations coming down, changes, but then also coupling that with intent and engagement data that we see from our own internal data. So, with having multiple verticals that we're looking at, really having a model in place that helps you aggregate those signals and try to get a indication of like a predictive indication on which of those verticals are we seeing the highest level of interest and engagement and intent? And then, beyond that, at the account level, really using that internal data that we have amongst those verticals that we prioritized, where are we seeing accounts really showing that in-market signal because they're engaging with our content, they're showing third-party intent signals, and really using that to prioritize because, it's very difficult with a small team such as we have to be able to create that level of personalized content. But if we can use that data and those external market signals to really triangulate our best bets and really focus our hyper personalized efforts there, that's where we've seen really good traction.
Do you mind if I ask a question real quick? Because Heather, we don't get to collaborate on some of these things, and I'm genuinely curious. How much do you use on your side? Because on the public sector side, we use a lot of third party, and one of the reasons is that's usually the trusted element that people will go to. But I know in commercial, it can be much more of a 50-50 swap where how much of it is Socure reaching out to these people versus a third party. Do you find a difference in kind of when you leverage a third party organization to do, say, a webinar or a piece of content versus something that's more organically Socure?
Yeah, I would say for sure, like when we're bringing in third parties to really promote, it's around a big report that's data driven, a big piece of content that we put together that we think will really have that thought leadership impact. So, we do both internal channels as well as external, but that's where we kind of pull it in because we think it's going to have the biggest impact of where we're investing our budget.
Makes sense. Rita, I appreciate you allowing me
Yes,
to
of
ask.
course. No, I love this like collaboration and open discussion. It's wonderful. Heather, I want to come back to you, and you were talking about account strategy and how it relates to vertical strategy. So your team owns ABM. A lot of our listeners are running ABM programs for the first time or are mature in their ABM strategy. But from your perspective, what have you found drives the best outcomes when running ABM initiatives?
Well, for sure, the personalization that we talked about and really using that kind of prioritized approach because you can't personalize everything, but really personalize where it's going to make the difference and it's going to move that revenue needle. So that's definitely thing number one. We are very ABM centric across our whole demand effort because of that, long deal cycles and complex sale. So really thinking about ABM, not just in digital, not just in an SDR motion, but really thinking about it as it pertains to all of the different marketing channels. Like for an example, if we're going to an industry event where we know who our ICP is, we know those accounts that can move the needle, just being very prescriptive and thoughtful and have a strategy be around how we're going to engage those specific accounts that we know can move the needle. And that's a very much an integrated motion between our account executives, our SDRs, and our campaign leaders as we approach each event, really thinking about the goals of who do we want to engage with, who do we want to continue conversations with, and who do we want to start new conversations with. So that's just an example of events and how we take that ABM approach, but we really try to permeate that across all of our efforts and all of our budget investments throughout the year.
You mentioned that ABM is really like a full team motion. And oftentimes we hear that there are marketers who have a hard time, engaging some of their sales counterparts to run ABM programs. What's your advice for helping to kind of build a stronger partnership there?
I would really say it starts with that data that we were talking about. And so, it's always a challenge. Sometimes it's a challenge to get that engagement between the SDR, the AE, and really have, not these siloed efforts going on, but really a team effort. So that's something that we've really focused on, I would say, over the last 12 to 18 months here in really scaling the triangulation of AEs, SDRs, and marketing. In our case, the SDRs roll up to the marketing team. So we've been able to really take a proactive stance in that. But the way to really foster that alignment, in my opinion, is bringing that data to the table. So each week we have a regular cadence with the SDR, the campaign leaders, and the direct sellers, in which they come together. The foundation for that call is really looking at the signal, the engagement, the intent that we're seeing within those accounts that that direct seller cares about, and bringing that to the table and saying, okay, where can we utilize this data, because it's, we're seeing in market signals at this account or that account, and how can we really jump on that, tap into it, and really prioritize our outreach, our messaging for this week, to capitalize upon that. And just that motion in itself has started to really foster a lot of trust between marketing, the SDR, and the AE. And so we continue to work on that. Of course, we don't have full adoption at the same level across our whole sales team, but those that have really bought into the program have then become our champions, right? We just, on one of our seller calls, we had one of our poster children for really, triangulating and working together with marketing and SDR, show his whole process to the broader sales team. And that in itself had more impact than any PowerPoint presentation we can do on any of this stuff. So it's been exciting to see, and we look forward to continuing that down that path in the future.
Brian, where does ABM fit into public sector marketing?
ABM really is public sector marketing, to be perfectly honest with you, especially when it boils down to really supporting the revenue side of the thing. I mean, you can do what I like to call air cover and branding, and that's one piece of it, right? I mean, one of the things that we talk about very often is people aren't going to do business with you if they don't know you, if you're not there and they get to understand your brand and trust your brand. So, I mean, that's not unique to public sector. That's commercially across the board too. On the ABM side, though, we have very specific engagement timelines that we can align to within an opportunity. So let's take federal government, for example. There's something called the FAR, which is essentially a rule book for how you can engage throughout a contracting cycle or procurement cycle. What you have to understand is where, as a marketer, you can influence the opportunity. So there might be an RFI stage, right? Or an RFQ stage. During those periods of time, once you've gotten ahead of, let's say, the branding and the awareness and the education, now you can come in and you can be more tactical. On the RFI stage, right? They're asking questions and they want to know more about your product. What you're really trying to do is you're trying to shape the RFP before the RFP comes out, right? How are you shaping it? Well, you're showing them and educating them on what's important, because a lot of these people, they're not identity experts, or pick whatever technology you want to talk about. They're not experts in this field. They're experts in that program, but they also know there's a layer of something that they need to be successful. So they're trying to seek out information. So as Socure, a digital identity provider, we're trying to show them what a best-in-class solution looks like and the different things they should be looking for. What are the KPIs they should be asking vendors to support? Ultimately, what we want is, in that RFP, we want them to bring in all those best-in-class elements that we believe only Socure can provide, right? If they write the RFP in that way, and again, this is more of a government thing, it's called LPTA, where they're looking for a technically acceptable solution that is the best cost, lowest price. Now you've won it before the RFP even comes out. Now that's how marketing can be incredibly valuable, where you've basically supported a sales individual by saying, okay, well, now we can go bid on this contract and there's nobody else that can compete with us. Literally, from a technical perspective, we've written it, we've helped the government write it in a way where Socure is the only organization that can win it. Now, that's how marketing can be a tactical asset to a sales organization beyond just providing that branding and that air cover. So when I talk about ABM, and I said it really is like what I say is government marketing, that's sort of what I mean. You get into the very tactical account-based support, and you can be absolutely invaluable if you understand how to engage and what government is really looking for.
I'm wondering, you were talking about, like the personas, the buyers, they're looking for specific information they don't have the knowledge
Mhm.
about. What are the channels where you see the best conversions happen in the public sector space?
It's across. I was literally just having this conversation a couple hours ago. It's literally across the board. One of the important things that I always stress to government marketers getting into the space is being diverse across channels, because government or organizations and individuals don't engage on the same platform all the time, right? There isn't like and this is, I'm going to show my age, right? There isn't like a Facebook for all of government. Now, LinkedIn is great, but not everybody engages there. And even if they have a presence there, they might not be heavy users. So where are they going to seek out information? This is why I asked, and I got so curious, Heather, about how you engage with third parties, because third parties are literally oxygen for us. We have to leverage them because we have so many challenges around. Let's use email as an example. Firewalls will keep us out where we can't engage with people even if we had their emails. um, so we really leverage them coming to us. So optimization of inbound, our website, our content, all of that SEO becomes so valuable. And all of it, as you can see, it starts to build, right? There's so much to think about as a public sector marketer. It's one of the reasons why we think of ourselves as like mini CMOs, where we're literally looking at how do we take events and bring them into digital, and how we optimize all of our web presences to make sure our inbound is there. But at the same time, how do we leverage our third parties to play into all of that? So it becomes challenging across all of those, but you become an orchestrator of all of it. And to me, the best advice I could give, if there's somebody out there in government marketing, is just understand the rules of the game, right? I mentioned the FAR within federal and understanding the procurement. Just understand the rules of the game, and the rest sort of follows suit, in my opinion.
There's no silver bullet of how to engage your audience, especially when you're
Mhm.
doing multiple verticals. So to really have that surround sound and then use your data to fine tune what's working for what vertical and what channel is so crucial.
So Heather, we started talking about this a little bit, where you were mentioning data and its role in some of your decision making with how you approach sales. But how do you view data and its role in overall decision making for your marketing programs, how you report up to the C-suite and beyond?
Yeah, for sure. We look a lot at attribution, and attribution is challenging. It's challenging to build. It's challenging to have data hygiene. It's challenging to tell your story, but continually looking at that data and understanding what channels are bringing in the engagement. And then, like for us, with a complex and long sales cycle, looking at the multiple touch points throughout that journey and what's impacting. And so, like, what we continually see is it's not a one and done. It takes multiple touch points to get someone to a conversation, and then multiple more engagements to get them to that opportunity, and then move that opportunity along. So, being able to track that data, understand at which point different types of programs are impacting the deal cycle is super important, and a big part of what we're continually working on and building our story to surface to leadership.
Telling the story of the full involvement across teams is so important, especially as we're all trying to solve the attribution challenges, and ways that we can go about attribution. Ryan, what about you? Where does data play a role in your decision making?
First of all, if anybody out there has solved the attribution problem, I would love for you to provide my email so they can send me a note and give me the answer, because
Me
it is
too.
very,
How
it is
local, right?
very challenging, and I would take any help we can get. No, I think on the data side, I made a joke before we press record, right? That no, I don't use data because I want to go into things blind, and I think it just shows you it's so valuable. I want to know kind of where we are at all point in time. Data is so valuable. One of the things that in the public sector we're always exploring are, I mentioned we're industry of industries. What other industries can we align to, right? But you have to figure those out by experimenting. It's not just a like, let me just go hypothesize and see. Like, we have tested certain markets to see, is there a there there. And data helps us with that. Budget data helps us. Engagement data helps us. I think the interesting dichotomy there too is you have to know when to say when. So there's certain markets that we've explored, and I'll one example. I mean, there was a market we wanted to explore in this calendar year, and we've already understood by the beginning of May that you know what, we're not sure there is a there, so we don't need to wait to the end of the calendar year to sort of pull back a little bit on what our investment looks like. And I think you have to be willing to say, yeah, let's not go there anymore. Let's pull this back and put resources in other areas where we think there's value. So I think you can leverage data, but you have to know when to say when, and really use that in a tactical way to pivot. I think and at least I've seen, Heather, I'd love your insight here. I've seen a lot of people that really want to prove that what their hypothesis was is right. And they'll continue pushing until finally the campaign's over and like, oh, that didn't really yield what we thought it would. Well, you could have found that out a quarter of the way down the road. And you just have to have the willingness to say, you know what, there just isn't an opportunity here. We need to pull back and pivot. That's where data can be so valuable in real time. Don't wait till the end of a program to say, yeah, you know what, that wasn't successful. We shouldn't have gone there. Next year we'll try something different. You can make real-time adjustments and really pivot into other areas, other industries, other personas across different digital platforms. And that to me is where data is hugely valuable, right? Is being able to not just take a look at empirical engagement and figure out attribution across programs, but you can use real-time information to say, yeah, let's pivot this. This just isn't our thing.
That's a huge point. And the way we try to think about our programs here are do everything in a pilot, right?
Yeah.
As we're doing a new initiative, let's frame it out as a pilot and let's get enough of a program that we can be nimble and we can get it off the ground quickly so that we can see if it's resonating or not and look at those early indicators of engagement. And and then if it's not, if it's falling on deaf ears or it's not having results, pull back on that, and it just gives you more opportunities, again, with a limited team and unlimited resources, that you can try and experiment more things, and totally agree with that approach.
And Heather, I know you know this well. I mean, we are in such a market, and with the size of our company, we're not Google, right? We're not Meta. We don't have the ability to kind of stay in there for years and years. We need to figure this out fast. And it can be a lot of pressure, but I also think you can't fall asleep at the wheel. You need to be able to see, kind of keep the pulse of that campaign at all times. It's not just like let it go and let's just see what happens in 12 months. It's week by week that we need to understand exactly what it's yielding to say, no, we need to pivot over here. We need to, I mean, as we say in the public sector, and shout out to Matt Thompson, we need to move at the speed of excellence, right? It can't just be something that we set and let go. We need to make sure we're always on it, we're always aware, and that we're getting the most out of our investment. That's very, very important.
And it feeds into what you said earlier about those external market conditions, like a new regulatory news
Mhm.
happens, right? And we've got to be in a position that we can pivot quickly
100%.
and not have these over-engineered, long-running, but programs, but really have a quick leash, a short leash
Yep.
on as we're trying new things, so we can pull back and invest at the drop of a hat.
I love that you're both talking about using data to also pivot quickly, because I think that's a really challenging topic for a lot of marketers. And like Brian
Yeah.
said, a lot of us are trying to prove that what we're doing is the right thing to do,
Mhm.
but sometimes we learn otherwise. And I think a team that really helps us with that, not just in the data, but in like the reality of what's happening on the ground, is
Yeah.
the SDR team. They're so critical to the success of any program on any channel. And also enabling the SDR team is critical to their own success. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And Heather, what do you think are the most important considerations for SDR enablement in the B2B marketing space?
I would say what we've seen a lot of traction with is this transformation that I talked about, where we were historically more of kind of spray and pray kind of approach, to really like evolve to this more bespoke and very strategic approach. And then also the tight alignment with account executives and marketing, really like being on the same team, not being in a silo, not using that attribution in a way that it's going to pit the teams against one another, but you really use it as a tool to support working together and then, really honing in on the direction that we're going together as a team. So, I mean, that's been crucial. And to really have like the marketing program owners as part of that conversation with the AEs on a weekly basis, both providing that enablement and that mentoring as a team together has really paid off as we move down that path. So I would say it's really a team effort for that collaboration um, on enablement, and then also going back to the last topic, talking about using data and being able to pivot. Like if you're gonna fail, let's fail fast. So,
Mm.
and let's use the ears of the SDR team as they're reaching more people. Let's use the feedback that the AEs are getting as they're in these meetings that are in more advanced deals, and really utilize that to really guide the team in what's working and what's not working, and where they should pivot at that tactical level as well.
Heather, I'm so glad you said that because that's something that's so forgotten is it's not just it's bidirectional. It's not just one way. It's not just, hey, I'm going to use this SDR to go propagate my message and hopefully we get some opportunities. It's really learning from the conversations that they're having. And I think you asked, I mean, you started that asking that question, Rita, around enablement, right? And that's part of the enablement is helping the SDRs understand that you're not just a mouthpiece. You are so valuable, and this is what I need you listening for. And then doing AARs on the back end to say, okay, well, what resonated? What didn't resonate? Um, to me, I mean, we kicked off this entire conversation by talking about messaging. That is one of the first places I go to start shaping messaging, right? If I have my AE saying every time I get to this point in a conversation, all of a sudden a light bulb goes off, and my SDRs are saying the same thing, well, me as a marketer should say, well, that's the message we should go with, right? Or we should build something around that. Um, it's hugely valuable to be able to have that bidirectional feedback from the SDRs.
All the time in meetings, on these calls, these podcasts, like SDRs are so important to really helping us understand what's working. And they're the first person oftentimes that the customer or potential customer will talk to after they've engaged digitally or gone to an event or wherever. And their feedback and what they're hearing is so important to us on the side that's building out the programs.
And when you're
And
doing it the right way, they're really that connective tissue between marketing and sales,
Yep.
and working together as a team for sure.
Great
yes,
point.
and I was going to say, speaking of events, you two
Mhm.
are just coming back from an amazing event, Identivation, where there was the intersection of exactly what we're talking about today, public sector and commercial marketing and the identity verification space. So I want to hear from you all. Like, what did you learn? What were like key things discussed? I know we started talking about some of the similarities between the two. Um, what can you share with us?
Well, I mean, first of all, I can share that the listening room in Nashville is a great place to go if you like country music. I recommend checking it out. Um, no, I think it absolutely. I mean, we already knew this, right? But it absolutely solidified the fact that use cases are analogous, right? And for those listening, for a little bit of background, the event itself was really the first time that we brought together public sector leaders and practitioners with the financial sector leaders and to have that conversation around what's happening, tip of the spear, what are some of the policymakers saying around what they're looking for, what's important to them, and educating both sides. It's the conversations that were there were incredible. There was some prognostication, there was some kind of tactical, again, tip of the spear, like this is best in class and what should be pushed out and everything in between. Um, so to me, it was great. But again, tying back to messaging, I mean, sitting in some of these sessions and hearing what some of these people are saying and seeing those light bulbs go off in the room and even across panels, so valuable, right? To be able to get that firsthand information. So absolutely love the experience. And I'm glad we could provide this forum for collaboration between two sectors that often aren't brought together in a meaningful way.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
cool to see that collaboration and just open those conversations, because trusted identity is something that we have to solve across, both government services and our financial institutions, and to get those two groups talking to one another and working together to solve a pretty big issue for us nationally was so cool to see. And just the start of this conversation. So we're excited to see where it goes in the future.
Thank you both so much for joining me today. This was a wonderful discussion, and I look forward to seeing what you both do in your respective spaces.
Thanks so much, Rita.
Thank you, Rita.